What are the constants to your process, no matter what band you're working with? What's the kind of through line with all the records that you've made for you?
A good question. I don't really know. I think each project's pretty different from one to the other. I think generally it's whoever I'm working with, it's just about getting pretty involved and trying to figure out, decipher for them what they're after and I guess kind of help them get there. Some people want more of a hands-on approach. Others, want to trust that you'll stay out of the way. I think it's probably more just gaining the trust of whoever I'm working with, and then we each push each other to, I guess, get the most out of the time we're spending in the studio.
When you say kind of gaining the trust of them, at what point does that usually come in the process?
Sometimes sort of sooner, over a few beers and, listening to music, and then others, it's just sort of understanding maybe, what they're after, whether it's a band or a solo artist, and knowing that you've got kind of their best interests first and foremost, and, you're not trying to make an album for yourself, so to speak, or I'll sort of throw ideas quite heavily, but I don't really expect my ideas to be the most important thing. So I think when we sort of get to that stage where if they want something crazy done in the sounds or whatever, and I'm happy to sort of back them up in that way, and then it just sort of becomes fun, and we I don't know, just make a lot of noise.
It's interesting that idea you were mentioning there, where you want to assure them that you're not there to make a record for yourself, when you're there to help them achieve what they want to do with it. Because I know that you used to be in bands and stuff in the past. When you moved solely to producing as your one creative outlet, did that change things at all for you?
I guess I don't really know. I never really thought about it. When I was in a band, I used to do a lot of the sort of demos, and sometimes eventually that was stuff that would make the record. So I always sort of had an interest in the recording and sound side of everything. And then eventually when, the band was starting to peter out and we had to figure out what we were going to do next, it was a bit of a natural sort of slide, I guess, going into, I had sort of lots of friends in the music industry, and then I had some bands and stuff that were happy to sort of take a shot with me in the studio, and just sort of evolved naturally, I guess.
What was the first record you did?
First record I did was, I did a couple like EPs, I guess. And the very first one was this band called Ghosts of Television, and then their friends Warhorse. And it was pretty fun. They were young, into smoking bongs a ton, so I think I had a lot of, I guess, leeway. No one was really keeping a check on me too much. So that was sort of good to sort of practice things. And then I guess the first actual album I made was for this band called The Mess Hall, and they were like a two-piece in Sydney. It was good, it was fun, and it ended up, I guess, the equivalent of what your Mercury Prize would be over there. It's called the AMP Awards, and it ended up winning that. So it was pretty lucky. And then I guess from that, it was a bit of a word of mouth thing. And the whole time I never really had any formal experience or training, so I was shitting my pants in every session and just trying to pressing buttons, turning EQs, not really knowing what I was doing.
When you don't have that formal education, and does that almost fuel you to work harder in some ways? Does it motivate you?
Yeah, I guess it would. Everyone's, or I don't know, I can't speak for everyone. When, at least for myself, and it was definitely a lot of fear, I think, when you're in a band or when you're doing this, of trying to do your best and trying to do something, and hopefully that'll, you won't get caught out, so to speak. So yeah, it was just tons of hours and lots of late nights when everyone would go home, just keep fiddling away and trying things, and benchmarking yourself against other albums and productions that you really like, and I guess just aiming high.
That's interesting, because there's often a thing I see getting thrown around with kind of bands that are up and coming, that they're speaking about how they feel like they shouldn't compare themselves to the artists they really admire, and they should instead compare themselves to other artists around them, because it's not fair to think they could achieve those heights. But were you very much from the beginning look at the records that were really important to you and trying to get to that point? Was that always in your kind of vision?
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand sort of both sides of that. So for me, I sort of feel doing music in whatever facet, why I got into it was because I was inspired by music, and there was bands and acts and stuff that have, changed my life, so to speak. And when I was making music, you wanted to do that, So in the production side, engineering and all that, I guess it's the same thing. You hear a drum sound that was just mind-blowing. How do I do that? How do I, make that happen? And, those albums that you would listen to and want it to sound as good as that. So in some ways, I try to use it to sort of set like a level to aim towards, but then try and be careful about not necessarily just trying to be a cover of that or, interpreting it to a default. I think it's good to have at least something in the horizon that you're moving forward towards.
Yeah, and I guess as well that when you're a young producer, you set something, like back in those days when you were a young producer and you set something like Sonic Youth as your benchmark that you're trying to get to, even if you don't quite have the skills at that point to get to it, the very fact that you're reaching for it, you'll probably get further than you would had you just tried to achieve something a little bit lower down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, also using a band like that was also like about vibe and, I think feeling comfortable with trying different things, because when I heard a band like Sonic Youth, it just sounded like different music to me at the time, and I didn't quite understand it when I was hearing other things that were a lot more easier to comprehend. Things like that were like sort of pushed to like experiment, and if a sound comes in your head, like how do you get that? And what would a band like this do? And a band like that would do it. So it gives you the courage to kind of try things.
When you were trying to go for a sound or something like that, would you read interviews with the band? Would you try and find out how they did it, or will you just try and reach that point by experimenting?
Yep, all of the above. I'll definitely make no bones about it. Like I would read and research, and any bits of information I would pick up in an interview, I would totally steal. I'm a big believer in theft. I think by doing that, it would lead me to some other place. I guess because when I started like being in the studio or a session, like I was working out of studio, so there was time limits for everything, unless of course, the owner went home and I had the keys. You can sort of stay back a bit, but for a lot of it was, you'd just see that clock, just suddenly minutes became seconds, and so if you kind of had like I would read about things and go, okay, tomorrow I'm going to try that. And then hopefully it got me kind of closer to some objective I was after. If not, it would spur something else on. But if there was any shortcuts, I was taking them at the time. And it's a lot different, I think, sometimes when you have your own studio, or especially now where, the computer is the basis of everything. You just get lost. But back then it was kind of, how do I get a cool kick drum sound? Okay, they did this, I'll chuck that up. And then that sounds good. Off you go.
Has the computer made things a lot more accessible for up-and-coming producers now, when it kind of removes that idea of a time limit, and it removes that idea of needing a massively professional setup to try and do something?
I think again, it probably just depends on whose hands it falls in. I definitely feel there's a benefit of learning proper techniques with stuff, in a sense, like cooking. Like you sort of learn measurements, and you learn what tastes good together, and how much of this and how much is too much salt. I think in recording, it's really good to sort of learn some of those fundamentals so you can then sort of, bend them as much to your own style. I mean, the computer is a fascinating thing. Like mixing wise, I'm pretty much just stay inside of Pro Tools these days because, I have to juggle different projects, and I need to be able to open up a session 2 months later when someone's decided that they want the shaker up. So I think having maybe some of the discipline of old school recording is really beneficial in sort of like the modern era of recording. And then there's just things you can do in the computer now that are like, couldn't do so much on the tape.
I guess as well, when it comes back to that analogy you were mentioning, like cooking there, and how much salt is too salt. The thing that's different about music making now is that if you add too much salt, you can just take it out again.
Yeah. Yeah. Or tune that salt. Yeah, it's. I guess it depends on your style and the genre of music you're working in and whatnot. There's definitely a thing where the computer becomes an instrument, and you can do some amazing stuff. And there's also, I guess, the handicap too, where, it doesn't always push some younger artists to maybe work on their music enough, because you can fix things and you can tune and time and, run the iron over it and get rid of any creases. It's a give and take, I think, with all that stuff. So I don't know. I'm always trying to, going back to one of your original questions, is, when I'm working with an artist or whatever, I do try and push them as much as I can possibly to, exercise their skills so that we don't have to fall into like too generic in the computer, where we can use the computer as an instrument rather than as the ultimate repair tool. Yeah,
it's a way of ensuring that the computer doesn't become a limitation. That ability to fix everything doesn't impede the music itself.
Yeah, or just like, it's like a hospital for music where you're just like, don't worry, guys. That's good enough. Go watch TV and, we'll just put the song through some surgery and it'll be all right. It's always nice. I think the lots of songs and stuff that I've worked on that maybe have come out the best, is when it has been fundamentally the most organic sort of approach.
I think it was the sports team one as well that I heard you talking about how you would be going to the song and you would just randomly throw things in. Like, okay, let's speed it up a bit, or let's try and come up with a new drum part.
Yeah. When we were sort of working on that record, we were sort of doing songs in different sessions over the course of like a year and a bit. And often, again, it was really short studio times. We kind of sent in to make a couple songs, and one would be the focus, and then those one songs become greedy and take all the time, and then, oh shit, we've got 2 more to go. And so you sort of turn into this a bit manic. Everyone gets a bit manic, and then, which is fun. And if you can kind of harness that energy, then we end up put the mix through the space echo and see what happens. And you're sort of collecting weird sounds and
chucking a harmonica in.
Chuck a harmonica in there. And everyone's going to wake up the next day and mute. But yeah, I don't know. I like, I definitely am a big sort of drums and bass fan. Not so much the genre, but definitely the instruments. And I feel if you can get sort of grooves and rhythms and those sounds right, it's one of the major pulls, at least for me, when I hear music, that like, whoa, what's this?
You're almost building it from the ground up.
Building it from the ground up, but I think when you, with a band like that, you're also trying to, I would really hope that their fans or whoever's listening to it, if they want to focus on the vocals, they can. If they want to focus on the drums, they can. If they want to focus on the bass, the guitar, the keys, or whatever, it's interesting to them for those individual aspects, as opposed to it sounding, sometimes it's sad that the bass player gets hidden in the background or, whatnot. it's kind of nice to make sure everyone gets a little bit of time in the limelight.
I think with what you were saying there about the drums and bass and that band in particular, though, there's such a kind of chaotic energy to the music that the drums and bass are almost like you laying down the tracks to keep it on the rails, and then the crazy train comes thundering through with all the guitars and harmonicas and shouting and all that business.
Yeah. You need something to anchor the boat, otherwise it's going out to sea fast. So yeah, we'll pin it down somewhere, which way or the other.
When it comes to, we were talking earlier on about understanding a band sound and what they want to do with it. How do you do that when the music is so chaotic and it does have that edge to it? Is it more difficult in that case?
Well, again, it's where it's sort of a project to project, and it's really trying to get on the artist's side and figure out what it is they're after and what is important in the I guess delivery of the music, because it can be tricky for me sometimes where I'll work on a project, and like I said, like everyone wants the drums banging loud, and it's like, yes, and you think you've cracked that code, and then you go to another one and it's like they want the drums to sound small and indecipherable, and you're like, okay. And you gotta revert your thinking. It's really just trying to understand what they're after. And then when you kind of get your head around that, and then I feel like then we're both in the same car and we're going in the same direction, and that's when the experimenting comes, and that's when it becomes quite fun. But yeah, I don't really know if there's not one formula that's from each, and I'm probably learning as much from the bands as maybe they are from me sometimes. You have to really be ready to say, like, you're wrong. Oops, I was wrong.
It's a two-way street, like what you were saying earlier on about, or what we were saying earlier on about how you might try and excite things and throw something in like a tempo change or swapping a drum part. When you do that to the band, it kind of reflects back on you too at another point in the process.
Yeah, for sure. It depends too, I think, where like how solidified they are in some aspects, where some tracks feel just a bit like a lost kid at the zoo, and you kind of like, all right, where's your mom? Where's your parents? And like, are they? Yeah, is it a key up, or are they? Is it 10 beats faster, or is it behind? And you're sort of trying to guide with some of that stuff because you think where the song needs to go, and then you got to try a bunch of things. Also, and also sometimes, I don't know, you go around the roundabout a lot, and then you might get off in a different exit, and that's great. Otherwise, you can just start back at the beginning and like, oops. Well, there you go. Like it was meant to be like this all along. So
what changes in that interim though? Why does it work when you come back around to it when it didn't the first time?
Sometimes maybe when a song or something it feels a bit hesitant at first, and so you do want to try these things, and you do want to know that you're kind of doing the best thing possible for the song. It's like they're not always really clear. It's kind of hard to explain, and sometimes the most simple things, to get to sort of appreciate that simplicity, you've got to throw everything at it. Otherwise, you just don't quite go, oh yeah, that's, that really works. Because I think people have a fear sometimes of if it's right at the beginning, like I don't know, sometimes there's a process going into the studio where like you're meant to go in and change everything, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, it's almost just like becoming comfortable and trusting in that process.
Exactly. I don't know. Sometimes sometimes you don't. And I'm going to probably speak in a lot of riddles because I just feel like that's just what happens. Like you have breakthroughs with some songs where it's like, yes, we had to go through all that hell and hack down all those weeds to get here, and it's awesome. And others you're just like, I am so sorry for feeling like I destroyed your music, but at least we realized it was right at the beginning, It's just constantly give and take.
Do you gain a better understanding of what the record is though through doing that?
Yeah. Yeah, again, project to project basis, something like the sports team thing we did over a year and a half in sort of 2-3 day slots in the studio, spaced out quite a bit. So what an album was going to be out of that, you don't really know. You really just sort of, what are these 2 songs we're working on at the moment going to be? And then other ones where, we've had 2 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, and there is a bit more of a focus. I think it always helps when the lyrics are written, which, funnily enough, is not usually the case. But I think when the lyrics are written, that's a big beacon to kind of get you through the fog. That can make a session go a lot faster. You sort of have the world that you're in, and then you start putting up some barriers, and you sort of like, okay, cool, we don't need to go over here. We don't need to do that because the world is this big, and this is what we're going to stay in and make this work. So if you can kind of understand those things earlier on, then the process doesn't have to take as long. It can be a lot more, you get a lot more done, it's more focused. But then, other times, not having those things too is like, I would have never have done certain processes if it was so defined,
Was that the case for the Rolling Blackouts Coastal Fever one? What you were saying about kind of having that strong backbone there and figuring it out pretty quick? Because it's so cohesive.
I think when I try with bands too, is I try to do a lot of pre-production. And with them, I think we probably spent about a week together in a rehearsal room. With their songs, they had, I'd say most of the songs, they have like 3 songwriters in the band. And for 1 or 2 of them, maybe the lyrics are kind of up there a bit, but it's more definitely like a feel and a vibe. So there was a lot of the songs that maybe didn't have sort of endpoints, or I don't know, the story was a bit confusing in the song. Like it was kind of hard to hear. There could be a bit too sprawling. I just went in there with the cleaver and just tried to chop as much out and, make it, hopefully, make it a bit more easier to understand for the listener, because maybe people who don't play an instrument or whatever, they don't really understand how to listen to like 6 or 5 people making sounds all at once. They sort of focus on 2 or 3 things. So is trying to get all those ideas across, but then also try to not make them confusing so much. So yeah, with those guys, it was good fun. Like we just, they had songs and we just tried to whittle them down, and like, after listening to, they'd play a jam of 8 minutes, and okay, what would be the chorus in this song? And everyone had a different idea, and so I'm okay, well, let's pick which one it is, and so we have somewhere to build to. So when we finally did that and then got in the studio, it was good. That just kind of like creating that sort of landscape that they do really well. It
sounds like I was speaking to an Aussie band earlier on today, Spacey Jane.
Oh, cool.
And they were saying that every time they write a song, it feels like, creating an essay and you go 1,000 words over the word count, and doing the production is a process of trying to chop all that out and just rein it back in and get it beneath it.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's probably when you get into the case where there's like, maybe when you come back around the roundabout, it's just trimming a few hedges. It's all there, but you just have to peel it back so people can see it clearly and it's not overgrown. I reckon that's one of the biggest proponents of my job, sifting through. Which is funny because I hate going to secondhand shopping.
How important is it for you as a producer to understand where what you're making is coming in, the chronology in the band and what they've released before?
Again, so it will probably come a bit from the band themselves. Some bands, would come to me and they were like, I want to do something different on this record. I think either they have a voice or they have a sound that was inherent in their music generally, which will carry through, but we'll want to approach it differently. And then others, if they're not so maybe vocal about that, they're just, you know, they have songs and they want them recorded and sounding as best as possible, then, you know, sort of we'll be more aware of what it is they've done and not trying to alienate from the past. But I don't know, I kind of feel like you listen backwards, but that can kind of, I don't know. It's usually I take it from the artist, and we usually just, after we've sort of talked about things and stuff we like, we kind of go, okay, let's go in and let's do this, and don't look back.
How did that function for the City Calm Down record? Because that very much feels like them, but at the same time, it's a step in a new direction.
Yeah, that was funny because I spoke with them prior, and I think for me, initially, some of the demos and songs that they'd sent forth wasn't really my sort of bag, and I kind of found like maybe it was falling into a certain sounding in a certain camp, and I was just, I think when we're sort of having like the introductions with each other, it was the old, you know, I just got to be honest here. this is how I think, and you know, totally I understand if, you know, that sounds offensive or you guys aren't into this at all or whatever. And I think for them, they were kind of actually happy to hear that. And Jack, the singer and who you know writes the majority of the music, was really like, yay, that's what I wanted. You know, I wanted someone to sort of pull me out of the comfort zone a bit and push me somewhere different. When we got that out of the way, and kind of all realized, you know, this is sort of probably how I would do things, and that they were interested in, you know, not doing the same record they did last time, then it was a ton of fun. And yeah, it was really cool. Like I had a great time with those guys, and they're awesome dudes, and, you know, still keep in touch quite a bit with Jack actually these days. I know it definitely didn't go down well with some of their fans, but I think they wanted someone to open that door to, or, you know, give them a green light to try some new stuff. And I was really into what they were doing for that. And yeah, we just sort of went for it, for better or worse.
So what were those songs when they brought them to you? Were they similar to what they'd done before, and you kind of wanted to pull it somewhere different, or? Yeah,
I think so. I sort of felt like that. Some of the initial demos, or there's a couple songs here and there, were maybe, so just what they'd done in the past, and, you know, of a certain, I guess, style, genre-ish of what that sort of falls into. I was just sort of saying, like, I don't know if this is sort of what you're after, then I might not be the best person for it, because I don't fully, it's not sort of
your cup of tea
necessary. Yeah, so it's sort of getting off, and then I think and then Jack wrote the television song. He was really excited, and I think we used quite a bit from his demo on that. It was just sort of more fun, and I was like, yeah, you know, this sounds rad to me. If you're going down this road, sign me up. And then that's just kind of how it happened, you know. I think they just, yeah, you know, like anyone, when you've done a few albums, you know, a certain way or whatever, you want to do different things, you know.
Were you aware that was going to be their last record when you were working on it?
No, that wasn't the case at the time, at least not that I knew of. I think they were all pretty excited about it, but it was, you know, a bit tricky because, you know, families are happening, jobs, you know, side jobs of, you know, certain members were taking precedent, and then, you know, sometimes doing those tours that kind of just rob your bank account. You know, it's hard to sort of like, get back in there. So I sort of maybe felt after the process came out and the album was out for them, the touring realities and all that stuff at the time for them was, I think it warmed down a bit, to be honest. And it was a bit like, what's the point of doing another one right now?
It's a shame because 30 years ago, a band like that, they would have been able to sustain a livable wage on it.
Yeah.
With the size that they were. They had a fan base.
Yeah. No, it is. It's tricky. It's, I guess music's such a moving target right now, especially with, fashions and trends and things, I think when that album came out too, band music was still feeling like a bit of a dirty word, a bit more niche. I don't know. It's really hard to sort of, it'll send you mad if you're trying to understand, and it'll put you into a big, deep depression. Yeah, it was a shame. I really liked the record, and we had a good time making it. And I definitely know whenever I go, and if I ever get back to Melbourne in the near future, we're going to all have a big old drink and catch up.
When were you last in Melbourne?
Oddly enough, at the beginning of this whole shit show of a pandemic. So I'd gone back to Australia to finalize my visa. And also I was making a record with an artist a Melbourne artist called Ryan Downey. I got back on, I think it was a Thursday, and I went and did my visa biometrics or whatever it is part, handed over my passport, flew to Melbourne on Sunday. We went into the studio on Monday, and by Wednesday is when they announced that they were closing the borders. That was the last time I was in Melbourne, and it was crazy. So we got the majority of this record recorded in those 5 days, and then got back to Sydney because I had a place to stay, and then sort of the rest of the record was Ryan and myself changing files over the internet.
So how long were you in Sydney for before you got back here?
I had to wait until the visa offices reopened to get my passport. So I got stuck in Australia for about 3.5 months.
Wow. It was such a shit show, you forget.
It was crazy. I mean, it's definitely not the worst place you could have been, especially in the first, I guess, universal lockdown. It was quite nice to sort of spend time with family, and I guess my girlfriend made it over there, and we were able to, I don't know, take it easy for a bit.
I remember Bad Dreams. They were kind of in the same spot. They were over here touring, or kind of the opposite way around, I guess, and everything started to shut, and they basically had to race back to Australia, cancel the rest of the tour, and kind of just hot tail it from border to border to get back in before they all shut. Yeah,
it was really tricky. Oh, those poor fellas! I didn't realize they were. I feel like everyone just got caught off guard at that point.
It's an interesting record to think about that one as well, in context of what we were saying with the City Calm Down one. Was that a similar thing for you? Because that's another record where you take that band's direction, that band's sound rather, in a bit of a different direction and kind of build up on what was there before, but still do something different with it.
Yeah, well, I think again, it was like a talk with the band, and was doing it sort of a collab with my friend Tim, who goes under the name of Jacklin, who we've done a couple of records together. We were sort of talking with the band, and they're, I guess, like it's classic, Australian guitar band, which was great.
Pub rock.
But yeah, a bit. But then, within the members and stuff, they're really versed in lots of different music and ideas, and, I think we wanted to just try and push a bit that to the front. So it just felt, just to lift it a bit, because Alex plays guitar, writes all the lyrics and stuff, and he's pretty good with the pen. I don't know, I just wanted to not too much, but give it a bit more of a platform. So it just didn't get kind of hidden, I think, just between, sort of just rock music.
Yeah, when you've got stuff on that album like Harry's Station, which is a lot softer, it's almost like ballady.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's a real throwback to that sort of landscape Australian sound. I think that sort of pops up in there. There's a band called the Triffids, which is quite iconic over there, and they're quite fans of that, and so we sort of want to harness a bit of that in that song for sure.
It's interesting you were speaking about Alex as a songwriter there, because I know that he's also a producer, but he didn't produce that record. It was yourself and Jet Ladder. What's that like, that dynamic, when you're working with a musician who's also a producer but isn't producing the record?
Depends, I guess. I mean, in that context, no. There was, felt like everyone's roles were sort of defined, and they were sort of happy to be coached a bit and pushed a bit. Yeah, there wasn't any friction or anything like that. Yeah, I'm trying to think back now because that was a while ago.
The years fly by.
The years, and just, I guess, maybe the condensed, some of these sessions, they're sort of done in 10 fairly sleepless days. So, and everyone's view or recollection of them is always quite a bit different than probably how it was. But yeah, I mean, it was fun. It was like we did it in Adelaide, in this guy's studio that he had in his converted garage. So there you go, garage band. And it was hot, but it was fun and weird, and yeah, I don't know. It was a good time.
When did you first get your own studio? Because you quite often just used to go from, or I imagine you maybe still do, before the pandemic, you would just go from studio to studio, and it wouldn't really matter the place that you were in for you.
I don't have a studio.
You don't?
I've
Wow.
got, no, I just have a pair of speakers. I guess kind of more like a mix setup, or sort of do the majority of my mixing from. But I've never really gone down my own personal studio route, mainly because I've just wanted to have a bit more freedom to be able to, sort of go to different parts and make records in other spaces and not worry about an overhead of gear.
Well, particularly in the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've been lucky that in Australia and even over here to some extent, most studios you go into are people who've got a passion for it, or, they're pretty great. And after a few days of getting your head around how it all works, it's nice it's always nice to, I like the change of environment.
Where did you do the Julia Jacklin record?
Did that in Australia, up at the Grove Studios, which is sort of 2 hours outside of Sydney. It's my friend's studio. I guess I was living up there for a while as well, so I did a lot of things out of there.
Is this a studio that's kind of out in the middle of nowhere?
It feels like it when you're there, but it's they say sort of like it's this town called Gosford, which is about 2 hours. I was just shy of 2 hours or whatever from sort of the Sydney centre, and it's like it's a coastal town. There's sort of some beaches nearby, which are quite nice. But the studio it was built by the bass player from INXS, and it was where he lived, and it was his private studio, and I think they did an album there or whatever before Michael passed. He eventually moved and sold it, and then the studio got expanded, and then it passed through a few hands, and then eventually fell into my friend Scott, who bought it. And it's in sort of like up the side of this hill. When you get to the studio, it's I can't remember how many. It's quite a few acres of property, and there's a big sort of dense kind of gum tree bushland out the back. So it does feel really, really secluded, and like you're in the middle of nowhere. But the reality is you're 10 minutes from the local grocery store.
That's what you want.
Yeah, it's perfect. I mean, for bands, it's amazing. And you go and stay there, and it's 24 hours. So usually what would happen is the initial few days with a band we'd sort of start between, I don't know, 9 or 11, between 9 and 11, around 10 or whatever. And then as the days and nights go on, you end up starting around 1 or 2 and going till 4 in the morning or whatever. It's great. It's really good. Everyone loses themselves out there. And, if you can put your phone down and not get off the internet, you really can just get right into the sort of pit of making records, which is awesome.
Would you ever implement like a no cell phone rule in the studio?
I definitely throw some angry eyes around. I try to give the benefit of the doubt.
Why do you need them when you're in the studio? I've never really got it.
I mean, I think it's just like everyone's new limbs that they can't live without, I don't know, even I'm looking at some construction workers across from my place at the moment, and they're on their phones right now. So I don't know. I feel like it's just commonplace. Like if you sit on a bus and look around, you don't really see many people looking out the window anymore. And yeah, and especially now, I don't know. I don't have an Instagram or Twitter or stuff. I've got a Facebook, but I don't even think I've logged into that in a couple of years. But there's so many lives being lived through this stuff, so it's annoying. It's definitely annoying when you're sort of listening back and you turn around and everyone's updating whatever, and they haven't actually paid attention to their song. That's when I kind of crack the shits.
I wonder if we'll look back on this time in 20 years and think how crazy it was that we were all just looking down all the time.
Well, keep your ears peeled, because there's definitely a lot of phone interruptions that happen in guitar amps and mic lines. And you get that tick-a-da. Had to edit a lot of that stuff out. But I don't know. I think if you can kind of, it's definitely if you're going to be recording, or like if bands playing together, that's sort of annoying in between takes, and you're looking. Some people, as soon as the take is done, they're just on their phones. Yeah, I know phone policy would be good, which we'll try in the next one.
What do you do, maybe not even necessarily related to cell phones, but say you're in a session and it feels like it's starting to lose momentum and starting to lose the atmosphere a bit. What will you do to try and pick it back up? What can you do?
Go to the pub. Seriously, sometimes just, I mean, I'm not advocating heavy drinking, but I think sometimes just everyone just clearing their ears, going outside, going for a walk, having a beer, just killing some nerves, play someone else's song. Sometimes it's when you've heard the same thing over and over again, or you're going for a take and stuff, like changing that's a big thing. Breaks, I'm bad at it, but definitely when you do a 10-15 minute break, that can save you a couple hours, really. So
in what way?
For that aspect of and I think the creativity is a bit slow, or you've heard something too much, and the idea of the song is to have a certain feeling run through it or express something. And if someone's tired or missed that ship at the moment, taking 15 minutes out and talking about something else, watching the worst show on TV, just getting your mind completely away and then coming back and listening, suddenly everything can just become really apparent, or there's like just a burst of energy again, rather than spending 2 hours just chiseling away at it more and more and creating a deeper hole to get out of.
Are you quite good at noticing in that? Like when you're in that process and you start to feel that happening, how long would it take you to kind of catch on and realize that you need to maybe take 5-10 minutes out?
I'd like to lie and say that I'm really good at it, but like I think it's sometimes it's just important at the beginning just to kind of be like, all right, everyone, if anyone's feeling a bit like over it or whatever, just don't be afraid to raise your hand. Because again, we can all get a bit, we can forget. It's the easiest thing to remember, but it's also the easiest thing to forget. And when you put pressure on yourself and you're under those constraints, you think the last thing that's going to help you, like avoiding that, or it is the thing that helps, like not focusing on the task at hand can really, I don't know, make it better. I don't know. It depends. Usually if we've got a session and we feel comfortable and we've got like time on our hands, then for sure, you start to fall into a routine and we go, okay, we'll break here for dinner, and okay, now we'll break here and we'll play cards for an hour. And then, you sort of integrate that stuff into it. But I think when you just go cold into the studio and everyone's trying to figure out each other out and how it all works, it can be a bit tricky to call time out when you maybe don't have that thing yet, that song or that moment where everyone's fist pumping. You just sort of like, if you don't have that, it's really scary to walk away from it for a moment. But you need to. Would you set yourself goals each day when you're in the studio? Would that help to keep you on the right track? I mean, yeah, sometimes. Yeah, it can. I mean, I tend to find that happens a little bit later. I think when you get the whiteboard out and you start, I mean, maybe it should be done that way. I'm not really sure, but I kind of often find in the beginning, the more I've prepared and had a game plan, the more that plan hasn't gone to game. So I sort of take the first few days, if we've got the luxury of that, and then find its natural rhythm. And then I think goals kind of, open themselves up. If, maybe try and work fast in the beginning, because if you kind of feel like you've got, feel like you're accomplishing things and getting things done, that really helps the mood. And then it feels a bit easier if we need to redo something or spend more time on a song or something like that a little bit later. You feel like you've got that ability to. So I think maybe the first goal would just say kind of get in there and get fast and just start doing big brush strokes. No matter if they're a good color or not, just throw paint to canvas.